Good morning, all. This is Pastor Larry. It's Tuesday, January the 16th, 2024. And I'm not in my normal studio, which is my car. As you notice, if you may have read last Tuesday's post, I've been in an accident, and so my car is in the shop. It wasn't my fault. So the other insurance company is paying for this rental car. So I'm in a different studio for this Tuesday's teaching tidbit. No one was hurt. No one was injured. The cars were damaged, but thank the Father, thank the Most High that no one was injured, because that's more important. You can always fix a car. And but a body or human being is very important to him. You can reach me at via email at pastor.shaddai.philly. shaddai@gmail.com. And our email or our YouTube channel is the letter L space shaddai.philly. Also, you can reach us at our office at 215-927-7188. And just appreciate you tuning into the channel. Today's teaching tidbit is something I've been praying about, and it's about, have we been lied to? That's probably the name of it, or they've lied to you, something along those lines. And I want to talk about that because Yeshua said that his enemy, Hasatan, or the adversary, or Satan, was the father of lies, and all lies emanate from him. And as I was meditating on it, I have some things that I want to share, but the Spirit of the living God gave me some, I guess, a little insight, which, number one, is no lie is ever from him. There's no lie that's ever from him. The father of lies would be Hasatan. And so you have different categories of lies. You have lies of omission, like I leave out some information. Like, for example, here's a example of omission. Say you're in a dungeon, and I have a key, and you want to get out, but I only give you part of the key, and you can't get out. That's omission. I haven't given you the whole truth or the whole key. And then there's lies of commission, which is you do purposely. Omission, where you leave things out. And then there's there's overt lies. There's lies where maybe we make because we don't have all the information, and so we're going based on what we know, and not based on the whole truth. Just like in Corinthians it says, you know in part, but then you'll know in full. So we don't know everything in fullness. So it's not like we're holding everything against people, but once you find out the truth, it's incumbent upon you to share or correct any lies that you may have inadvertently been a part of. So let's get here a little further. But there's some information that I've come across, and I'd say over the past 8 years I've been studying this, and I found out that there's some things that either a lie of omission, commission, overt, or whatever. But there's been lies that we are now coming into the truth of. So, for example, let's start in Genesis chapter 15, verse 13. And this is, this is Yahweh talking to Abram before his name has been changed to Abraham. And he's talking about the covenant that he's establishing with Abraham and his descendants. Listen to this in verse 13. It says, "Then the Lord said to Abram, know for certain," that means it's going to happen, "that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated." So it's not saying they will be enslaved and mistreated like they'll be enslaved for 400 years, but between the enslavement and the mistreatment will be 400 years. He says, "But I will judge the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will depart with many possessions." And then, so we've heard that this is what the promise was to Abram. And it was applied to the children of Israel when they were in Egypt. They said they were there for 400 years. Paul, in Genesis chapter 3, if you really understood what he was saying and didn't have this, the lie of omission or commission, whatever you want to say, or faulty information, if you didn't have that in the background, if it hadn't been published to you and published far and wide, you would have read what Paul said, and you would have understood it. Myself included. When I say you, it's the rhetorical you. Listen to what Paul says in Galatians chapter 3, verse 17. He's saying, what I mean is this, the law that came 430 years later, right? So the law came with Moses, which is when they left Egypt. That's after he came down from Mount Sinai. So the law came 430 years later, does not revoke the covenant previously established by God. So we just read that in Genesis 15, that Yahweh was establishing a covenant with Abram. That was the covenant. And he also said 400 years that your people, your descendants, will be enslaved and mistreated. So the law came 430 years after the establishing of the covenant. 430 years. Abram was not in Egypt at this time. He was in Canaan. And here's some scripture to back all that up. And I'll put these scriptures that I'm going to read in the comment section. I'm going to add my comment, and so if you don't see it right away, please be patient. I'll put it out there. Come back to the channel. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 4, Abram was 75 when he left Haran to go to Canaan. So he was 75 so it says the law from when the covenant. And then in Genesis 15:13 is when Yahweh mentioned about the 400 years that would be served. So he had been in Canaan from 75 to 100 when his promise, or Isaac, was born. So that's 25 years difference from when he went into Canaan till when his son was born, which would have been when he was 100. And that's found in Genesis 21, verse 1 through 5, when Isaac was born. Genesis 12:4 was when Abram went into Haran. And Isaac was 60 when his sons Jacob and Esau were born. So that would have been 60 years later, right? 25 plus 60 would equal 85. And that's found in Genesis 25, verses 25 through 26. Joseph was born, and let me jump over, I'm sorry. Joseph was 17 when he was sold into slavery. And that was Genesis 37, verse 2. And in Genesis 41, verse 46, Joseph was 30 when he became the prime minister of Egypt. He was actually born, you'll see in Genesis 30, verse 24 was when Joseph was born. And it says Joseph would have been at about 39 after the 7 years of plenty, because he became premier of Egypt. And it was 7 years, so he'd have been 37. And then there was 2 years of famine by the time when Israel started making their overtures into Egypt. Genesis 46 shows that Israel went to Egypt. Genesis 47, verses 8 through 9, shows how old Jacob was when he went into Egypt. He was 130 years old, and his son would have been about 39 at that time. So you can kind of surmise how old Jacob was when Joseph was born. In Genesis 47, verse 38 through 31, Jacob was 147 when he died. And then Genesis 50, verse 26, Joseph was 110 when he died, after spending 93 years in Egypt. You're like, why are you saying all these numbers? Because Josephus mentions that the children of Israel were in Canaan 250 years and Egypt 215 years, which equals to 430 years that Paul's talking about in Galatians 3. So they couldn't have been in Egypt 430 years. And there's history and some other things that I don't have all the time to go into, but I'll try and get a little bit more synopsis for you. But Abram was 75 when he went into Canaan, 25 when he had his son Isaac, or 100. So that's 25 years. When his son Isaac had his son Jacob, that would have been, he was 60. So 25 plus 60 is 85. It says that when Jacob went into Egypt, he was 130. So you add that 130 plus the 85 that we got from 25 from Abram to Isaac, and then 60 from Isaac to Jacob. That's 85 plus 130. That's 215 years. It matches up exactly with what Josephus said. If you read in the Greek Septuagint, which was written before the King James was translated, the translation that the King James uses is younger than the Greek Septuagint. And then so that says 215 years, or it says in Exodus 12 verse 40, it says that they were in Canaan and Egypt 430 years. That's the same 430 years that Paul is talking about in Galatians chapter 3 verse 17. That's found in Exodus 12 verse 40. The Samaritan Pentateuch, which is also older than the Latin Vulgate that the King James was translated from, is also the Samaritan Pentateuch. Also mentions in Exodus 12 verse 40 that they were in Canaan and Egypt for 430 years. So why am I bringing this out? Well, because Yahweh's word is true, and if he says that his children, Abraham's children, his descendants, would be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years, then he meant that. And there's only one group of people that have matched up with that 400 years. As a matter of fact, President number 45 for this country observed, and I think it was House Bill 1242 or 1240, where it was commemorating the 400-year, denoting the 400-year time frame that people from the transatlantic slave were brought into this country. And you're like, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, it's documented that the Igbo have a direct relation or direct lineage to Israel, that they're Hebrew, they're Israelites. It's also documented that the Limba tribe is from Israel. It's documentation. They have their oral tradition, and now they found out through some of the archaeology and other things in history that it's actually correct. Now, those people were the people, as a matter of fact, where the Igbo tribe came from was called the Slave Coast of Africa. Interesting. The Slave Coast of Africa supplied quite a deal of Igbo slaves in the transatlantic slave trade. Through DNA research and study, scientists believe that there were about 40 to 60% of the ADOS, or African descendants of slavery, are from Igbo, or Nigeria, which would be in Nigeria today. And even Richard Nixon, when he was, and this is found in the Library of Congress, he was mentioning to, Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, called, and it's documented, and we can share that as well. I might put that in the comment so you can find it, that the Igbo were the wandering Jews of Africa. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, but I just wanted to just put this out there so that you can start to look for yourself to see that, okay, then if they weren't in Egypt for 400 years, then who was enslaved and mistreated for 400 years? And you'll see that there's one group of people that refers to. Now, listen, it would be disingenuous to say that there's nobody over in Israel now that descended from Abraham. That's not what I'm trying to say. That's not my job. That's above my pay grade. If you read what Yeshua said in Luke 21, verse about 24, and we'll read that in another lesson. But when they were asking him about the sign in the end times, he says, and this hadn't happened yet. They had already come out of Egypt. He said, "You will be led captive into all nations." And is there a group of people that has been led captive into all nations? You have to think about that. Why is this important? Why am I bringing this up? Well, because like I mentioned before, lies are lies of omission, commission, overt, could be just a lack of information. So there's lies, and it says the enemy is the Hasatan, or the adversary, or Satan is the father of lies. So there's been some lying going on, because the whole world has been deceived into thinking that Israel had been in Egypt for 400 years. When Yahweh said in his word that it would be, and then the world, they've done manipulations because they read this 430 years in Exodus 12 verse 40 and Galatians 3 verse 17, and they tried to manipulate and figure out, well, how it could be 430 years. When if you read the Bible, and it shows how old people were when from the time Abram went into Egypt, and how old Jacob was Abram when he went into Canaan, and how old Jacob was when he went into Egypt with the children of Israel, you'll see that was that 215-year period that's referred to in history through the works of Josephus. It's referred to in the Samaritan Pentateuch, which and the Greek Septuagint. It's found in those two, which were older than the version that we utilize for the King James. Listen, King James is good. I'm not telling you not to trust it, but I'm just saying that sometimes information is faulty, and the enemy has been trying to subvert Yahweh's will. He doesn't want people to recognize who they are, and who they were. Why am I saying this? Is it important? Yes. Why? Because if you believe a lie, if your foundation is built on a lie, the house is going to fall. Is this important? Does where they come from? Yeah, in a way, it's important. Because if you read in the book of Revelation, I think it's chapter 1, about verse 20, where it's talking about what Yeshua is going to look like when he comes back. It says his hair is going to be white like wool, and his skin will be like burnt bronze or copper. And so if that's what he's going to look like then, what did he look like when he's here? In other words, like, and is that important? Yes, because if you have this faulty view, someone's going to show up. It says there's going to be many false Christs. How do you think people are going to be convinced to fight against him at the Battle of Armageddon? Because they don't know who he is. They don't believe him. They don't know who he is. Why? Because they believe a lie from the father of lies. Listen, the color of Yahweh for salvation isn't important. Of Yeshua for salvation isn't important. Listen, he could be orange, green. I love him. I need him. That should be, but I'm still saying, but you still need to know the truth, and the truth will set you free or make you free. But if you don't know the truth, just like that allegory that I was using earlier, if you're in a dungeon and I give you a partial key to unlock the dungeon, you won't get out. You need the full key. You need the full truth. And so as we read the Bible, and once you start to recognize things, and especially from the Old Testament, that the New Testament built on that. The Old Testament was laying the foundation, and the New Testament is what we believe now. We walk by. We're embodiments of the book of Acts, where we should be. We should be Acts 29. Anyway, I'm bringing this out so you understand and know. One is, suppose you are one of Yahweh's original people, chosen people. Listen, it says that if you belong to Christ, you're Abraham's seed and heir according to the promise. But he also said there's certain things that he said about his specific chosen people. Doesn't make them better, but he said some specific things. And if you don't even know who you are, you may be one of them. I'm not saying listen, it would be disingenuous for me to say that every black person that came through the Atlantic transatlantic slave trade is from the Igbo tribe. There were others caught up in that as well. But there were a bunch of them. And I happen to know that I am one because I've done my DNA research. Holy Spirit has corroborated. As a matter of fact, he's the one that gave me that initial urge to do the exploration. So anyway, I just wanted to put this out there so that you would recognize that there's lies, there's omissions, there's lies by commissions, there's lies that are overt. There's some people that know this truth, but they still don't want to bring it out because it doesn't help them. And it says the first will be last, the last will be first. So some people want to continue to be first, so they don't want to share that. But there's also lies because of misinformation or the fact that you didn't have all of the information. And so I'm starting to try to lay a groundwork for information so that you would recognize the truth and you'll know the truth. And the truth would set you free or make you free. So listen, with that, I'm going to stop this and just want to say shalom and Yah bless you. Hope you have the best day ever. Hope this is your best year ever. Until next year, your best day ever. Until tomorrow. Yah bless you. Love you.